Today's stream is about to start. We'll talk about code or whatever we'll talk about today. It's about to start, so please hang tight while I check that everything is okay. Sound check, camera check, lights check. How's my hair? Oh, wait, I don't have any hair. Maybe put some pants on and I am good to go. So get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Hello and welcome to another meeting of the C++, JUCE, and Digital Signal Processing Study Group. So this week, the meeting is kind of unusual because it's just me, and it has to be like that for a couple of reasons. Some people have other things that they need to attend to, but also I want to keep this stream very short because someone who is near to our hearts in the Reaper community, Mike from Let's Talk About Reaper, will be streaming in half an hour over at Produce Like a Pro, and the link is in the description below. So right after this stream, which is going to be half an hour long, I want you all to go there and support Mike. He's launching a new course about drums programming, about drums editing and mixing. Great stuff. So let's keep this short and sweet and go straight to the point. Since last time, I made some progress and I want to share the progress that I made with you. First, I looked into the issue of the ergonomics of developing a VST. So anytime that I do any change in the code, I have to rebuild and then I have to reload the VST into the digital audio workstation to see the changes. And someone who was watching the stream last time, Tail, who has been on the stream too, great person, so generous with his knowledge and his time. So Tail explained the probable reason why this happens. It's not 100%, but probably the reason why that there is some issues in this process. So the issue specifically is that anytime that I compile, I have to close Reaper and reopen Reaper for it to pick up the new version of the plugin. And I tried many things. I tried to remove the plugin from the track and re-add. I tried to remove the track and re-add. I tried to close the project and open a new one. It doesn't work. You have to close, as far as I can tell, you have to close Reaper and reopen. There may be a workaround to this. I haven't really tried, but there is an option to rescan VSTs and clear the cache. I think that if I clear the cache, there is a chance that it will pick up the new plugin without having to restart Reaper, but it's kind of annoying to have to come here and rescan. And I have so many VSTs installed on my machine that this scan without cache takes forever. Also, I think that closing and reopening Reaper is probably faster than coming here. So there is that. And I think that maybe I could have a dedicated Reaper instance where I change this I edit this path so that it only includes the path where my plugin lives, and I put it in a special place, and then I rescan without a cache, just that place. But I don't think it's worth it, really. And then what they'll explain to me on an email is that this probably happens because Reaper loads the VST into its own address space, and then it reuses that over and over as you drop the plugin into new tracks. Even if you close the project, whatever you do, that ends up happening to just use the cache. And he says that on Windows, and apparently he uses Windows mainly. On Windows, it's even, well, it's different. I will not say that it's better or worse, but it's different. You probably are not even able to write to that location. You're not probably even able to overwrite the VST file, which I guess on Windows would be a .dll. So you're not even to overwrite that file because the file is actively being used by another program. So if I have Reaper open with the automixer, so this automixer, the one that is the VST version, if I have it open here, interestingly, it glitched out because it auto-muted the track. Well, anyway, if I have this open the way that it is right now, on Windows, Dale told me, and I believe him, that I wouldn't be able to build this successfully because this is overwriting that file on the file system. So another thing that I tried is like, okay, so Reaper is doing this caching of the VST, so maybe that's for performance reasons. One of the reasons why Reaper is so fast, maybe. So what if I just try another DAW? So I went to Ableton Live because I wanted to use the VST. I could go to Logic and use the audio unit, but audio units have more checks in place and validations, and I didn't want to deal with that. So I went to Live and I tried to make the automixer load in Live, and I failed. I think that it is because by default, JUCE creates an Xcode project whose build is configured to create a VST in your home directory. So I can open over here in Finder, and you see that the automixer is over here on my, I don't know if you caught that, but it's over here on my home directory, as opposed to the place where all the other plugins are, which is here on the system directory. This is where every other VST is. But in order to write to this location, Xcode would need to be running as root, which is no good. So I guess that's why it does things this way. And I even went in Ableton Live. I don't want to open Live to show you this because it's going to mess up with the audio interface and the rest of the stream. But in Live, I wasn't able to pick up the automixer. And there is an option in Live for you to specify a custom directory to load plugins from. And I specified my home directory or my plugins directory under library under my home directory. It didn't work. Ableton Live didn't like to pick up my plugin. I never bothered installing the plugin on the system as opposed to my home directory because at that point I would have to configure Xcode to write to a place where I don't want it to be able to write to. So that's that. It's not ideal. The ergonomics are not perfect. The feedback cycle of writing C++ and compiling is already slower than something like JS Effects. And having to close and reopen Reaper is another step. So it's kind of annoying, but it is what it is. I don't think there is a better way of doing it. I would be curious to know if you're watching this and you know a better way of doing this, or you have seen someone doing it in a smarter way, do let me know because I'm interested. In any case, so there is that. There is another issue that is kind of interesting. I loaded the plugin into Reaper several times as I was experimenting with the things that I'm about to tell you, and the plugin crashed sometimes. And it didn't crash just the plugin, it crashed Reaper entirely. Whole DAW came down. I guess, again, it has to do with the idea of Reaper loading the VST into its own address space. So if the plugin crashes, Reaper crashes. And I suppose that when I am loading the plugin into the track, no, I guess it's not on the track, but on the plugin itself, I can right click and I can configure things like I want this to run as a separate process or a dedicated process. And if I do that, I think that Reaper will not crash. My plugin will crash, Reaper will not crash. So interesting. I thought that even in this mode where Reaper brings your VST into its own process. I thought that even in this mode, Reaper would have some protections. It doesn't. But then the question becomes, why is my plugin crashing? I don't really know, because sometimes it is working, sometimes it is crashing. So it seems like I am using some sort of unspecified behavior, undefined behavior. So maybe I'm doing something like to the memory here that is using junk, but sometimes the junk just happens to work in my favor. Maybe it was even this junk that made this auto mute that produced loud noises. I don't know. I haven't really understood what's going on here, because this was supposed to allocate the memory for me, and the memory was supposed to start all zeros. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's why I would need a line like this. That's what Tail told me last week, and probably that's that. I haven't really looked into why this could be, but there is some sort of weird shenanigans going on. Next interesting trick was one that kind of worked, but not really. So let's talk about how I was calculating RMS, but I was just putting it on a variable and dropping it on the floor. I wasn't really looking at the value of RMS. So I couldn't really prove that I was computing RMS correctly. And that's where I left off last week. And Tail wrote to me explaining the whole situation of having to reopen Reaper, but he also explained an idea that I think I had that idea before, but I didn't implement it. The idea is quite simple. Instead of trying to control a slider or draw something on the screen, just produce the RMS as a sample. And of course, that's no longer going to be something that you can hear, but it's something that you can plot, and then you can see what's going on. So before I do that to RMS, I'm going to do that with a simple value, so 0.5. If I run my plugin, the first channel, I have here a right pointer, and it's for the first channel. So the first channel should become a bunch of 0.5s. And the other channels, I'll just be zeroing them out. And then I will recompile and do the song and dance, right? Okay, so it is on the track, and you can see that it's producing audio because there is this 0.6, there is this minus 6 dB here, and minus 6 dB is 0.5 in linear. So if you convert 0.5 to dB, you get minus 6, and that's what we see. Oh, and see, Reaper just crashed. So at least we were able to see that this 0.5 was coming out. Now I'll change this to show my RMS computation, and I'll also uncomment this, because maybe this is the solution after all. It's just putting a bunch of zeros there, but really, if the effect has run for more than a second, the zeros have been overwritten already, so at worst it would produce a loud noise in the beginning, but it shouldn't be crashing Reaper. So here we are. So this time we should be seeing the result of the RMS computation. And I will actually put this on an item because I want to plot this. So I'll take the automixer. Oh, but the item has to have some noise in there, right? So let's put a tone generator. Maybe the tone generator isn't the best one because it doesn't change over time. So here's another idea. What if I just take a track and enable it on this microphone and start recording a bit of my voice, because that changes in volume over time. Then I'm able to, I hope I will be able to, without Reaper crashing, drop that there and glue. And these values are rather small. but I do see stuff there. And I do think that it gets louder. I'll try to load the two side by side. So I have here, I have dash, and here I will glue. Okay, and this is way zoomed in so that we can see stuff happening. And I think it's working. It looks like it's working. When it gets louder, this goes up. When it gets quieter over here, it goes down. So I think that this is working. When I first tried, it wasn't. Now it is. First time I actually see this working. So that's the other issue. Now, for the final thing that I did this week is, it's kind of interesting actually. It gets a bit complicated. So let's get into what my current automixer in JS Effects does and what my new automixer in VST does. The one that we are building, how that will work. So the current automixer, the one that I developed in JS Effects, my first JS Effect actually, works like this. You have a bunch of microphones and you group them on a track or on a parent, and then you route the first child to channels 1 and 2, the second to channels 3 and 4, and so on, and you drop the automixer on the parent. And that's only possible because in Reaper, tracks have 64 channels. But in other DAWs, they may not. And you may not be the other DAWs may not have the flexibility that Reaper does in terms of routing channels to different tracks and so forth. So my idea is that it will work differently. It will work like this. You will drop one instance of the automixer on each child, and each child is going to send the signal to the parent, not by regular routing means. And it may not even be a folder like this. It may be more a bus structure like that. And then it will, so you will have to drop the automixer on each track, and it will be operating on send mode. And then there will be yet another instance here on the bus operating in receive mode, and it will be receiving from all these guys. And that's one thing that I'm in the middle of investigating, because I know it's possible. I know other plugins do this, but it can be quite tricky. And one thing that I was thinking about is, well, what about the latency? Because there is latency compensation, and I tried this in Reaper. I still have to try it in other DAWs to see how this will pan out. The problem is, suppose that you have some processing on some microphones that introduces latency. I actually created here this plugin for testing, and its purpose is exactly to create latency. And then suppose that another microphone does not have this kind of processing. Now, it is kind of weird to process some microphones differently than others, because it will probably sound different, and that's usually undesirable. But suppose that you have that scenario. Then suppose that my automixer is right after this guy, but on this track, the automixer will be here. So there is a difference in latency. This instance of the automixer will receive the audio later than this one. And then how does that work at the end? When I'm sending the audio to here, are they going to be in sync? Are they going to be out of sync? Because if they are out of sync, it is possible that there will be like some echoes or something, because the main use of the automixers is when you have multiple microphones in the same room and there is bleed between the microphones. So in that case, there is a chance that the bleed will be out of sync with the original source. So the experiment that I came up with is something that is rather primitive, actually. It doesn't test the whole thing. It just tests one part of the problem. Part of the problem being, are the tracks synced before summing into the parent? And I think that's the whole principle of plugin delay compensation. So let's get into the code that I wrote, the experiment that I set up, and how this all works. And this may teach you one thing or two about plugin delay compensation. At least it taught me something. So let's put a tone generator on this track. And then let's route the audio from this track to the other two children, but let's remove it from the parent. And now if I flip the polarity of the second one, they null perfectly. But what happens if I drop my test plugin in here? Now, this is delaying by this amount. Let's prove that my plugin is doing what I claim it is doing. How do I add a track to the end? Doesn't seem like it's possible to add a track to the end. It's only possible to add tracks after another track. Okay. So I'll drop this plugin here and I will enable this for recording. Or maybe not there, but there. And I will make this a child of that. So now, as I speak, you can see that the meters are moving differently. So this meter is my voice in real time, and this one is with a delay of this many samples. I will click so you can hear, so you can see the difference. See, that was the difference in delay. And the way that this plugin works is, it is really simple. It uses my library just because I had it, and then it creates a bunch of delay lines. If you have been watching my streams in which I create circular buffers, that's very familiar. Then this is something that I have not really covered in one of my streams, but I talked about it to some extent on my code review for the automixer, I think. But it has been a while. So this is a JSFX way of declaring plugin delay compensation, PDC. You have to say what is the minimum and maximum channels. In this case, I am working on a stereo track, so it goes from channel 0 up to, but not including channel 2. And then I have to specify the delay, which is just coming from the slider. Then this is just so that the number of channels is available here on the init block. And then the sample block is just pushing into the circular buffer and outputting some delayed samples collected from the circular buffer. So it's a very simple delay line, but it does report its own latency. The effect that this has is if you have some recording, so again, I'm recording my microphone here, but if I have some recording and I drop this effect on the track itself and then I glue, it will have no effect on the audio. It will not delay anything because Reaper knows to compensate for the delay that is reported by the plugin. But still, it is delaying. If you hear this in real time, it is delayed by a certain amount of samples. Okay, so that's what the plugin does. Now, in this context here, what is happening is I am delaying this guy that has the flipped polarity. So this is delayed with respect to that. So the question now becomes, when these two are added up on the parent, do they null? And the answer is yes. So Reaper is dealing with two tracks, one with a delay, one without. But before sending them to the parent, Reaper syncs these two. Great, so that was proof that my original architecture works. My original architecture uses this notion of syncing when sending to the parent. So good. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this architecture in the first place, because I didn't know if it was going to work. Seems like I always swept this under the rug saying, yeah, it's such a minor issue of syncing that, and it's such an edge case that you have some plugins that have delay in some tracks but not in other tracks, so it's no big deal. I always brushed it off, but now I proved that this actually works. So with that, let's talk about the things that I need to do next. I need to actually test that if I send audio from a plugin, if that is gonna fly, if that's gonna work. Because suppose that I have that scenario where I have one microphone here, one there, and this one has no latency, and this one has a bit of latency, and the automixer is at the end of the effects chain in both cases. So in this case, I'm not talking about plugin delay compensation before summing up, I'm talking about plug-in delay compensation in the middle of the effects chain. So if I have an automixer in this position, in that position, are these two in sync or out of sync? I actually expect them to be out of sync. So it is something to be aware of. And I have an idea of an architecture that could work for this, but it gets more complicated. So I guess the idea would be, instead of sending all the audio to the parent and then doing the mixing and the parent will output the audio, the idea is you send all the audio to the parent. That's inevitable. But then you send back from the parent to the child the attenuation that it needs to produce. And then the children will attenuate. And then you have to add them up again. So it gets kind of weird and it gets complicated because you have to have a track that has no audio coming in or out. It just has to host an effect. It's possible that we'll have to do it that way. Oh, and look who is here. Fotis is here. Hello, it's great to have you here, but I am already wrapping up. So I explained the progress I made, the experiments I made. I explained what I want to do next, which is this check. So I guess what I'm going to do is in JS effects. Hang on, let me explain to Fotis what's going on. Hello. Yeah, we don't hear you, Fotis, for whatever reason. But I'm just about to wrap up anyway, so this has to be a short meeting. I already covered what I did this week, and unfortunately, I will have to wrap up now because there is another stream by Mike from Let's Talk About Reaper that is coming up soon, and I guess probably they are starting now. And it's over there on the Produce Like a Pro channel. The link for that is...
Yeah, I know. I saw the link.
Yeah, it's over there. So
now, right?
Now I invite everyone who is here watching and you, Fotis, to go there and watch Mike instead.
Okay.
And we meet again in 2 weeks. So that is... What is it? The 12th. Is that okay by you?
Okay. Yes.
All right. So...
You can hear me, right?
Sorry?
You can hear me. Okay.
Yeah, now I can. Yeah.
Sorry.
So
yes.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me,
I was busy.
Fotis, and thanks everyone else who was watching. And I look forward to hearing from you what you did over the course of 1 month, right?
Okay.
All right. So bye, Fotis, and everyone else. Right. And I see you over there with Mike. Let's support his work. Bye.
Okay. Bye.